Okay, so let's get started. Today is our session 10, and we are in a mock closing. So you have been following us along. We started about how to get leads, how to do a buyer's presentation, a listing presentation, when you are under contract, and congratulations, after you go under contract, you go to closing. So I have invited a dear friend of mine, Debra Baker, with Kenyon Title. She's gonna tell you what happens at closing. And then after all, how you get paid. So hello, Debra. How you doing?
Hello.
Good.
It's wonderful to be with you all today. I really like to start with explaining the behind the scenes of the title company. Many times as real estate agents get ready to go to closing, there's some assumptions that are made just because of a lack of understanding what's happening. So let's assume that you are the buyer's agent and you are looking for that final closing disclosure or closing settlement statement, and you're wondering, why is it taking title so long to get to me? You know, and most likely understand, under the TRID laws, the buyers are supposed to receive their final closing disclosure or CD 3 to 5 days in advance. So there is a beautiful assumption by all involved that because the closing disclosure has gone to the buyer, that everything has really been finalized on that loan. And title is just sitting around, just postponing getting you the documentation so you have an idea of what's going on. This also happens with the listing agent. Where is the final closing settlement statement? What is my seller going to net, etc. Well, what happens beyond the behind the scenes as a lender, on the very front end, in order for your buyer to get pre-qualified, you hope the lender has gotten all of the basic information. They've gotten their W-2s, they've gotten 2 years of tax returns, they've gotten 2 months of bank statements, they've gotten all of those basics, employment information, so they can really verify, does that buyer really qualify? The loan officer, and normally their processor, put that together as a package for the underwriter. The underwriter looks at all of it. I always considered, when I was a loan officer, I'm building the case for my buyer with the documentation proving that they have the ability to repay the loan and they're not going to be over leveraged. The underwriter is familiar with and has all of the guidelines for how does that buyer get approved for the loan. They go through, check mark all of the documents, and they may ask for some other supplemental documentation, letters of explanation. Why is there an extra $3,000 in your account if you only get paid, you know, twice a month at X amount? Why is there an extra $1,000 that has gone out of the account? Or on the credit report, it says that this account is closed. Do you have proof that it was closed, or things of that sort? So they're trying to finalize and dot all the I's, cross all of the T's. And so once all of that has been completed, the loan has been completely satisfied as far as all of the conditions. Initially, the loan officer gets conditional approval, and that's where they provide the supplemental information, and then they have clear to close. And so that's kind of the final piece. That loan then, packaged as it is, goes to the closing department. The closing department puts it into a queue, and then they have to create closing instructions. And that goes to the title company first. And so those closing instructions can be anything between 5 and 25 pages long. It gives the title company or escrow officer all of the instructions for how to fill out that closing disclosure. We operate by instruction. So the lender says, okay, in the closing disclosure, it's a 30-year loan. It does not have a prepayment penalty. We fill out all of the information, as well as a closing settlement statement, and we send it back to the closing department. We have to get their approval, and we have to make sure that we're balanced with them as far as the bottom line. Sometimes there's a little back and forth in that process. And sometimes there is a bit of a delay in getting that approval for everything to move forward. We don't receive the loan documents from the lender until after that's been approved. So you would assume, which would be the ideal situation, that when the borrower has signed that closing disclosure 3 to 5 days in advance, at the same time, the title company would get those closing instructions.
But sometimes it doesn't.
But sometimes it doesn't, more often than not, and that's why you're waiting.
So through all this process, You as a title company are in communication with the buyer's agent, with the seller agents. That way they talk to his clients to make sure title is doing the job.
Yep, everybody is checking in with us. The first really important piece is to schedule with the title company the date, the time, and the location of the closing. And that way it's on the radar. You would assume, because there's a contract sent in with the closing date, that we would just naturally schedule it. On the purchase contract and on the closing instructions, what does it say? Who's the one that's going to coordinate when and where the closing is going to happen?
Mutual agreement.
Mutual agreement, or some, I mean, there's some discussion as far as how it's put together. It could be, determined by the seller, by the buyer. We don't determine that. I was working with a new agent and he said, I don't understand why you haven't scheduled this. Well, we work by instruction. You haven't asked us to schedule this. You haven't told us where. You haven't told us when. And so our escrow officers are in multiple locations. We've got a Denver Tech Center, downtown Denver, Westminster, and we're opening a Golden office. We can split up a closing. We can have a buyer sign in one place in one day, a seller closing before or after that point. Whatever is convenient for any of the parties that are involved, we need that instruction. So as the selling agent working with the buyer, it would be helpful as you're in communication with the loan officer to say, how does it look? Do we have clear to close? Sometimes there's interchangeable lingo, but that's why I want to cover this piece. Even seasoned agents don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. Do we have clear to close? Means it's going to the closing department. Is it okay to schedule this? We don't schedule until we know that's been finalized. How often do you have to do an amend, extend?
Often.
Often. And so we're waiting for that. Another little tiny piece, and sorry I teach by a rabbit trail because there's a lot of details involved with this. As a title company, we generally don't order the status letter or record change from the HOA until the end of the process. Reason being, if we order it exactly 10 days before that closing is scheduled, and you've got a 2-day amend extend, and the status letter is $300 and the record change is another $150, the HOA company only makes it good through that 10 days. They charge you a whole nother fee because it's extended by 1 or 2 days. Completely unfair, quite a racket in my opinion. And you guys know what a record change fee is charged for. They type in the buyer's name as the new owner on the computer. That's all it is. But I understand their manpower hours are very valuable, and that's why they have to charge exorbitant amounts of money. So just keep in mind that the sooner that you can know that the loan is completed, sometimes it's last minute, try to get that closing scheduled. Then the title company will look at ordering the HOA status letter, which is essentially the final payoff as well as the record change. Everything's in place and we're waiting, for those closing instructions, and then we're waiting for the approval. Then we're waiting for the loan documents. There are many times we actually get the closing instructions the morning of the closing, and we're waiting for the loan documents, and we don't have them until right before closing. So it is not the escrow officer not treating you with importance or value, nor your clients. It's we're waiting on the lender to get those items to us. Does that help? I mean, how many, you had several closings?
I haven't get my license.
Okay.
So you're beautifully new.
Yes, I'm scheduled for November 3rd.
To take your test. Oh, congratulations.
As a seller, as a buyer agent, for example, and I'm under contract and communicating, I think it's my job. I communicate with everybody once a week. The title company,
great idea.
the lenders, the other agent, my client. And then I ask the title company, what do you need to have clear to close? The lender information. I call the lender, we're just waiting for you, send the information. I'll send it tomorrow. Title, 2 days later, title, did you receive it? Good, we're clear to close. Okay, agent, okay, client. So once a week, once I'm on the contract, I put on my calendar, who do I need to call constantly in communication? Because I know they're human beings, and I have had situations where my title person goes on maternity leave. Okay, who's in charge of this file? I need to talk to that person in charge of the file. Okay, and then somebody comes in. Okay, what do you need to have clear or close? That's usually my questions. What do we need? Lenders. Okay. What do you need? Taxes. Okay. What else do you need? Whatever. So make it as a habit when you're on the contract You're communicating with everybody.
That is a beautiful practice. I really love that, because so often we're reaching out to the agents asking questions, and many times we're not receiving any information or answers. If you're on the listing sites, we've kind of covered what happens behind the scenes on the buyer side. On the listing side, at the very beginning of the transaction, the title company is going to need to know, who are the HOAs? Is there one? Is there two? Is there three? There is some assumption. Let me back up one more piece. When you're putting together, as a selling agent, the dates and deadlines for like the CIC docs, covenants and restrictions, and the minutes and the budget for the homeowners association, obviously, you know, it's the seller that's supposed to provide it to the buyer. As agents, you're the conduits for your clients. And so there are many in the industry that assume it's the title company's job to provide those CIC documents. So who in reality is supposed to provide that?
The seller.
The seller.
The seller.
Title companies are happy to help, but understand that the HOAs are not recorded in the county records. It's not always quite as easy to know who's the HOA, especially if there's been a change. As a listing agent, information in the MLS. Who's the HOA management company and how much is it? Is it quarterly? Is it monthly? And what's the amount? You already have the information. So when you're doing the initial disclosures and you're doing the initial exclusive right to list, you know, documentation, it would be really helpful if at that time you made sure you're already getting source of water, square footage disclosure, you're already getting all of those items. And so get the HOA management company that information. The other piece as a title company that we need that would be helpful if, you know, it's part of your listing package would be to get the bank name and the account number for their current mortgage that's on the property. Do they have one? Do they have two? If they have a second HELOC and there's no account balance on it, it still needs to be closed. We still have to get a zero balance letter. And so just know we're going to be looking for that information. On the very front end, again, once you're under contract, usually the seller has a username and password for the HOA, or they can get it. We're happy to log in and then, you know, send that information out. Just let us know. I would love for your help. Here's a login and password to send over those CIC documents. You can log in, you can help the seller, they can do it, you can do it, the title company can do it. Just make sure you have a plan for how you're going to get that over to the selling agent and the buyer. And so keep that in the back of your mind. Hang on the in the line of HOAs. If you're the listing agent, it's not a bad phone call to make to find out how much is the status letter and the record change. And then when the buyer is giving you an offer, make sure you're double checking the contract to find out who they're saying is supposed to pay for that. As the listing agent, I want the buyer to pay for those extra fees, and I'm going to look at that if I'm going to accept their offer, especially in this kind of a market. So just be prepared, and again, it's not a bad idea to know exactly how much that's going to cost. And are there any special assessments? There's a particular building downtown, the Brooks Towers. It was built in like 1956, and I believe it's $2.3 million that is going to be a special assessment on the building. They need to redo all of the wiring and all of the copper plumbing. And so the special assessment's about $100,000 per unit.
Yes.
So
yes. I just sold a condo right now that has a special assessment. Regularly it's 185, which makes it very appealing to a buyer. But special assessment is 180 a month for 6 months. It's kind of, oh, holy, who's going to pay that? Communicate that as well.
But you're saying the assessment is $100,000?
$100,000. It hasn't been assessed yet. It's coming. And so, so they're trying to figure out how to package that together, whether the HOA loans to the homeowner, the new homeowner, the X amount of money towards that special assessment. But as owners in a building, you're sharing in the cost of the upkeep. So HOAs, I think, would be a fantastic individual topic to truly educate the agents on what do you do, what are the strategies, what are the important questions, how can you be knowledgeable. And here's another one that most agents don't think about. When do you pull in an attorney? As real estate agents, we're not supposed to practice law. We're not supposed to translate or interpret any document. if there is a situation like this, or let's say it's the Glass House downtown Denver, and it's an upper end, condominium development, it would not be a bad idea to have resources of real estate attorneys who could translate. You could just tell your buyer, I would really recommend that you would, talk to this particular real estate attorney and have them look through the HOA documents to see if there was anything that could cause you issue or liability as a buyer, anything that would cause you discomfort. Do you read every line and every page of the CIC docs for your clients? I don't.
I don't. Certain pages, like the rules and regulations, okay, you cannot have a grill outside, or you cannot put dry your clothes in the balcony. So I make them understand what are the rules and regulations. But all the financials, I tell them, go with your CPA or go with your tax accountant and let them translate the financials for you.
It's a really important piece. And so anyways, I know that's a lot of preview and overview before you're walking into a closing. But again, there's many seasoned agents I've worked with that really don't understand what you're not getting me the documents that I need. So just know that we're doing what we can. And there's been plenty of times we've been scrambling to print the loan documents because we've literally just received them as we're walking into closing. Do you guys have any questions?
So as a new agent, I recommend you're probably going to have a mentor. So once you're ready to go to closing, the mentor may be with you at closing to explain to you, because you're going to receive a package like this, probably like 3 times big.
Right.
So you as an agent need to be able to explain that to your client and understand it to know what's going on. Yeah.
It would be
Super easy.
it would be a fantastic idea if you're working with the seller to let them know, I will make sure that the title company sends to you and to me before closing the closing settlement statement, and let's go over it so you know what to expect to make sure everything's correct. There's many times that the agent has not looked over the closing settlement statement, walk into closing, and then we have to make corrections at the closing table, and they wonder why it is not smooth. They haven't checked their own CDA or DA, disbursement authorization from their company. It's missing an administrative fee, or it's missing a home warranty that their company always provides, and they're mad at us because it doesn't feel as smooth. If you read through the closing settlement statement, it really helps. We can correct it before closing if something's missed, or if there's a special assessment. There are human beings on the other side typing in the information, going through the 25 pages of closing instructions as well as the contract to make sure they don't miss anything. And so it's first the escrow officer, you're then the double check, agent. The buyer's lender is, also another double check system to make sure everything is included. So just be aware and be attentive. As real estate agents, most of us are very sales oriented and not as detail oriented maybe as we should be. But when it comes down to your paycheck and taking care of your client, I think that's important to go through it, even if it's over the phone right before you walk into closing. So if there's any changes, it can be done before closing. Okay, guys. Okay, so I'm an account executive for Canyon. I'm not an escrow officer. Thank God, it'd kill me to be handcuffed to a desk and do numbers all day, every day. But I do plenty of closings, especially at month end. And so if you've never been in a closing before,
Oh, only on my.
so usually the closer sits at the end of the table. So the closer, an interchangeable name, is an escrow officer. Again, I'm an account executive, so I could just be called the closer. The buyers and sellers can sit on either side of the table. And I know this may seem really basic and silly, but if you're a newer agent, you're like, okay, who really sits where? How does this go? So to get back to basics, if the sellers want to sit, I would normally be sitting at the end of the table. We would have the seller sit on one side, with their husband and wife or 2 people, and then the buyers on the other side. The agent sits on the far side of them, and then we may have a lender that attends, the loan officer attending the closing, just to be there to celebrate and be a support. So I normally would ask either set, buyers or sellers, who tends to be very detailed and more attentive to wanting to see the numbers and looking at the document. When it comes to the closing settlement statement, I really like to make extra copies, even though it's not necessary to have 5 originally signed copies anymore. But I would like those people sitting closest so that I can reach them and show them the numbers. Sounds kind of basic, but I think it's kind of important. And I'm not gonna assume it's a male or a female because it's whoever tends to be more attentive and really wants hands-on, you know, with the details on the document. So let's say we start with the seller. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's wonderful to meet you all. I'm Debra Baker. I'm an account executive for Canyon Title, and I'm going to be conducting this closing today. Have you ever sold a house before? This is a very important transaction to both of you as parties. Let me know if you have any questions. I want you to feel free to ask. If you need me to speed up because you've done this 10 times and you don't need as much explanation, I am totally okay with that. If you need me to slow down, please speak up. This is the largest transaction that you will ever do until you buy that $1 million house the next time. So I just want them to feel comfortable that they're not feeling too shy or that it's not appropriate for them to ask questions or interrupt. I really want them to feel like their needs are being met. So I go through, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller on the top, sales price of the property, we have a total amount of $575,000. We have a seller credit that was agreed to, most likely an amended extend during the transaction for $500. We have an assessment from 10/5 until 10/21 of $3.87, and that's actually a credit to you. And then we have a debit or a charge for county taxes from the first of the year until today's date. Today's not the 5th, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah, that's very important. And keep that in mind if you need to extend a closing, because title needs to account by taxes by the day.
By the day.
So that means if you change it 5 days later, they have to do the whole documents all over again. So they're by the day.
And that credit for the county taxes, property taxes for 2017 are not due until 2018. So Mr. Seller, you're going to give a credit to Mr. Buyer for the amount of the time that they did not live in the property until today's date. And then we're going to go under real estate commissions. Please double check. We have a transaction fee.
There is a transaction. So here at the K company, that's where you put the transaction fee. So usually
Is it $2.95 or $99?
Depending, there's the 99 or the 49, depending.
Okay, just depending on your agreement. Make sure that's on, do you guys call it a DA or a CDA?
CDM, yeah.
Certified Distribution Authorization?
Commission distribution authorization, commission. So make sure that John, what you do is you request to John to do your commission distribution. John sends a letter to the title company's instructions. This is how you're going to spell, okay, this is your transaction fee, and this is how the commission is going to be cut. Yeah.
And do you guys choose to charge to the seller or the buyer that transaction fee, or does it depend on the agent?
It depends on the agent. Like I charge it depending on my clients. If they have, if they're doing a lot of transaction with me and they're used to already working with me, I do charge to them. If this is the first time home or something, I'm not gonna, and by the way, you're gonna pay 99 transactions, so I eat that cost. So depending, work with your clients to see if they're willing to pay it or not.
And it needs to be in your exclusive right to list or exclusive right to sell contract. And so just double check to make sure the proper fees are. And I usually do not read all of the charges out loud. I don't try to cause extra attention to be paid to any particular thing. I just go through and here's your real estate commission that's being paid out line by line. We've got the owner's title policy as agreed to in the contract.
This is, I'm sorry, this is the seller. Remember the seller pays a commission.
Mm-hmm.
And you already explained it. Out of one commission, it's being split in two. Yeah.
And you're welcome to jump in anytime. It doesn't bother me at all. And then the next line item, we've got the owner's extended coverage as agreed to in the contract. Below that, we have half of the closing fee. And then we show POC, means paid outside of closing, and it's just verifying that 2016 taxes were paid, and those were paid in 2017, so it's just listed. There's a final order at escrow here of $450. That might feel a little high, Mr. Seller. The way the water escrow works is that we have ordered them to read the meter today. We don't get the bill until some days after closing. And so in the summertime, when you tend to be watering heavier, there could be a larger fee there. It's an escrow. That means that as soon as we get the water bill, we're going to pay that bill and we're going to send you any overage. and there's going to be a form for you to fill out for your forwarding address. So we're not keeping that whole thing. Don't be alarmed. You know, we're going to make sure we're going to pay you any overage after we get the bill. And on the very bottom, paid outside of closing, we have your home warranty that is being paid for by your particular real estate agent on behalf of the buyer. If you look at the very bottom, you have the total of all of the charges, you've got the total of all the credits, and this is the balance due to you for $625,972.19. Does everything look correct? You all comfortable with that? If you could please sign. However, they are entitled. When you do the original listing agreement, look in the county records, and if it says John P. Smith, John P. Smith should be the way it's listed. If it's John Paul Smith, you should put John Paul Smith. On the buy side, when you're doing the exclusive right to buy, it needs to actually match however they fill out their loan application. We had this happen at closing where the real estate agent was also the lender, and she had been in business for quite some time, but was still a little fuzzy on some of these basics. So she had a middle initial on one form and she had a full middle name on another form. However, we received the contract to buy and sell, that's how we enter into the system. That's what the general warranty deed is going to say. That's what the bill of sale is going to say. That's what all of our documents are going to say. When I got down to the loan documents, it said something different than the general warranty deed. And so we were able to change our documents because it needed to match what the lender's document said. So just as a heads up, the general warranty deed needed to match the deed of trust, and we had to make some changes.
So always when I'm working with my clients, either buyers and sellers, and I'm doing my exclusive agency, I follow, I follow their ID. Because as soon as they arrive at the closing company, title will ask for their ID to make sure, okay, you're the person authorized to sign. So whatever M period dot junior the third, exactly on the ID, I put my contracts. That way there's no confusion.
That's a very good way to do it. Good point.
And then they sign that exact way too, so it'll be like first name, middle initial, last name.
However
Right,
the documents are listed in the county records and however the contract stated is how we're going to fill it out. Again, on the loan side, they filled out with a full middle name. On the contract, they only had a middle initial, and it just needs to match. We're able to correct it, but those things don't make a closing feel smooth.
So typically a closing should be 30, 45 minutes, but if you start doing changes, I remember being on closing 3-4 hours because there's landing changes, contract changes, everything changes. But usually 30, 45 minutes should be the period.
If it's a cash deal.
Oh, okay.
If there's loan documents, I would say a minimum of about an hour. Truly think through what is the schedule of your seller, and do they need to sit through the entire closing while you're going through a stack this deep of loan documents, especially if it's a VA or FHA? The stack of documents is going to be very thick. We could go through all of the basics, all of the resale title documents and so forth, and we can actually dismiss the seller and they can go home, and all of the other things can be done by wire transfer and so forth as far as paying. And just a rule of thumb, please be cautious about chatting with the lender loudly during closing. I had elderly buyers at the table, and their real estate agent and the lender was sitting and chatting loudly. And it was really rude. They couldn't hear what I was saying. And I kept trying to get closer to make sure that they felt comfortable with what they were signing. It doesn't matter if it's a seller or the buyer. And if you have elderly clients, people who are, let's say, quite a bit older, they may need a closing agent to go through the documents louder and more slowly. They do not want papers shoved at them quickly. They will feel rushed, they will feel disrespected, and so, just be attentive on who your clients are and how detailed. Here's another nice little rabbit trail. If you're dealing with someone who's more of an engineer type, they're going to want to read every single word of every single document. They're going to be very, very detail oriented, and you will know that type because they are going to want to read and review every document you send to them, every basic disclosure that seems not of significance to us because it's part of our business, but they're going to want to read through everything. If you know that that's the case, find out if they're on the selling side you know, you're listing their home. If the title company can send you the entire package before closing, like the night before, so they can read everything they want to read before they get to closing. Once they've read it, they're going to sign like crazy and they'll be fine. But just know who you're working with. Any other input on that front?
Yeah, if I already know my client's personality, I tell the closing agents ahead of time, we're gonna need 2 hours for this one. That way they schedule it accordingly. Or no, my client had done it before, it's very quick, don't worry about it, 1 hour will be enough. But yeah, I tell the title company what to expect.
That's really helpful. Okay, on the buying side, again,
So
I
this
asked
is the
them,
seller.
are
Okay.
you, is this the first home that you've ever purchased? Please do let me know if you have any questions. I want to make sure you feel comfortable with everything that you're signing. I go through the top, on the very top of the property, or on the top of the page, we have the sales price of the property. We have the credit, that would be your earnest money. Then we have a seller credit, you're receiving a credit of $500. Then we have an assessment, and that was from today's date through the 21st when it's due again, and I believe that was for water or sewer. And then we got the taxes, you're receiving a credit. Now you will have a bill for the entire amount due in 2018, but most likely, since you're getting a loan, they're opening an escrow or a savings account in which your lender is going to pay these fees. But know that today you received a credit from January 1st to today's date to help with the offsetting the cost for the time you did not live in the property. And then we have an administrative fee to Coldwell Banker, your real estate agent. Down below, we have half of the closing fee as agreed to in the contract. Tax certificate, e-recording, that's electronic recording of your documents. We have the express delivery service fee. We have the recording fee for your general warranty deed, and then we've got the sales tax, which is 0.001 times the sales price of the property. At the very bottom, and this is a cash deal, at the very bottom we have the total of all of your charges, the total of all of your credits, and this is the balance due from you. Here is another little pit stop, just keep in mind. Anything over $500 that has to be brought to the table or to the title company, only up to $500 can be done in a personal check. It's the good funds law. From $500 to $15,000, they can bring a cashier's check from the bank. Not a money order from 7-Eleven, but a cashier's check from the bank. Anything over $15,000, we actually need to have wired from their bank. They need to verify the wiring instructions for the title company. We always include a copy of the wiring instructions with the title commitment. There have been several cases of wire fraud. I have included information about wire fraud. There's been numerous accounts of when someone has hacked a buyer or a seller's email account and sent them alternative wiring instructions. It's horrible. It's a horrible, horrible, sad thing when they did not verify by phone to us as a title company what the wiring instructions are. So please keep that in the back of your mind when it comes down to preparing your buyer for how they're going to provide the fund. If your buyer is saying, I'm waiting to, it was in the loan process on their LE, loan estimate. If the LE changed, then there was a revised loan estimate. Then they had their CD, their closing disclosure from their lender. That's the final numbers, that's what they're bringing. And then the title company is only copying all of that information from the lender. You don't have to worry about it. You just say, did your loan officer send you a copy of that closing disclosure? On the bottom, that shows you exactly what the amount is that you have to provide for the title company. Okay? So I have everybody sign that one.
Yeah, so there is a lot of communication also going with the buyer and their lender, because sometimes they already gave the down payment to the lender and they're just showing the numbers here. So remember, you as an agent, you're not touching, no money, everything is with title or the lender. Because sometimes already come, lender is ready, is set. I had been in situations where the closing is not doing good because they want a home guarantee. Then I volunteer as a service provider. I pay for your home warranty, how much it is. Then I talk to the title, I make the check to title, and then title makes it happen. So sometimes I had paid for water heaters, for inspection items, to kind of, well, water heater was not changed, okay, I pay you for, so sometimes you need to step up
Be
to save the
flexible.
situation.
And
At a
hopefully,
certain limit,
and
yes.
hopefully you resolve those issues before you've
Before.
gotten to the closing table.
Mhm.
It is your job as a real estate agent to keep them calm, to negotiate, to mediate on their behalf with the other agent, and hopefully it's been a smooth transaction. And so, you know, we don't want to settle any disputes at the closing table.
Right, so you could keep the buyers and the sellers in separate rooms, right?
Yes, you can.
You can schedule at different times. If there's been conflict, if you have a divorce situation, you can separate husband and wife and have them close and sign papers at separate times. That's a whole nother topic, as far as what happens in divorce situations or bankruptcy situations or foreclosure situations or someone's passed away. But absolutely for closing, you can have a wife come in and sign totally separately at separate time, date, location from the husband.
Or just buyers and sellers been doing it separately too, if it was
Absolutely.
conflict-free
Yes.
transaction, yeah.
If they want to keep it private, if there's been any kind of uncomfortable issues during the transaction, separate them, keep them
Separate.
happy. Don't put them all in the
You
same
could have them
Yeah,
on
right.
separate offices,
Right.
separate rooms, or
separate
separate
days,
times.
separate times,
But
any of those
you
things.
helped me one time, we went to a senior home to sign the seller's paper, and then we ran into the office to sign the buyer's paper, so you could do that. So,
Your managing broker, John Marshall, was working with the seller, and we had to go to an assisted care living center. The gentleman had broken his hip, and we weren't sure as far as his medical condition, how he was going to be. So I had prepared a lengthy amount of time for him to sign these documents, and we weren't sure what kind of health he was going to be in. We actually had to track him down in the hallway as he was walking around, which is a wonderful thing. But when I looked at his driver's license, he was born in 1926. And
yes.
so, and his home was in a trust. So it was like James Paul Smith, trustee of the James Paul Smith irrevocable trust on every document. And I'm in an assisted care center, and I had to point to every word, and I'm kneeling next to his armchair because there's very few places to sit down in this room. So it is possible at Canyon, and we are very flexible with where we close, how we accommodate that. There was a night nurse that was a major grump because she worked all night long, and we're closing the next morning before she went to sleep. She actually cussed out and yelled at an inspector coming to the home. She was a little volatile. And so I went to the home to do the closing with the agent, apart from the buyers, and it was on the far north side of town, and we just wanted to make sure everything was smooth and kept her separate from anyone else because we weren't sure what she was going to say or do. So there's all kinds of situations that you run into. But with communication, you guys can accommodate whatever the situation is. Just communicate. And the more communication that you're prepared to do to help the escrow officer know what's going on behind the scenes, the easier it's all going to become. The warranty deed.
So this is the borrower. Okay.
So the next one, so I point out, we've got today's date. This general warranty deed is what transfers title from you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, as joint tenants whose legal address is, for the total amount of $675,000. We've got the legal description there, and we are going to be electronically recording this document. Mr. Buyer, this proves that you're going to be owning the property after everything is dispersed today. Have the seller sign it. The next one is a real property transfer declaration. As an agent, there are very few things that you have to sign. This is one of the documents that the escrow officer or closer will most likely defer to you to help them fill out.
So you'll need to be present for that, yeah.
And so this is actually from the assessor's tax office. And so we've got most of it filled out. We've got the property address here. It's a single family residence. We have today's date as date of the closing. We have the contract date, the total sales price of $675,000. And then was any personal property included in this transaction? This property is templated as in carpets, drapes, freestanding appliances, equipment, inventory of furniture. It's going to ask you the value of those items, generally looking for a garage sale value, and then describe what they are. I have seen an amazing array of ways this is filled out. The way I explain it, The significance is if you're buying $1 million house and you've got a surround sound system that's inside wiring and the whole bit for $100,000, the tax assessor's office is going to value that $1 million house at $900,000. But they may want to tax that $100,000. So it would be very appropriate if, as a, a listing agent, a buyer's agent, that you let the two parties interact and they do a separate outside of you bill of sale for if there's an exorbitant number of items that was included in the sales price of the property. So if there's lawn care furniture, if there's a built-in outside kitchen, if there's, it's an Airbnb type home and it's fully furnished, do a bill of sale outside of closing. The lender does not want to see that part of the value of the property is not the property itself, but personal property. Keep it as simple as possible. For me personally, the rule of thumb has been that the value of those things, an easy number is 1% of the purchase price. How long do you want to sit at the table trying to calculate a garage sale value for a couch and let's say a bicycle and a lawnmower that's being included, plus used carpet, drapes, blinds, and a stove? So 1% is a very reasonable amount. If the house has very specific stainless steel high-end appliances, then it's one, I would normally recommend for you, Mr. Listing Agent, that in the MLS you would put specifically the brands of those appliances, and you, as the selling agent, that you put in the contract to buy and sell specifically stainless steel. What's a high-end brand? A Genair, something like that for the microwave, oven, stove, dishwasher, those kinds of items. Because the seller, if they are not educated, may think they can take that with them, or they didn't, intend for it to be included. But you put it on the MLS. The buyers thought that they were included because it's in the kitchen. And so unless it's in the contract, you as a listing agent or selling agent may end up buying a replacement to those items. That's just another nice little rabbit trail. How do you feel about that recommendation for 1% and then putting specifically on the line items?
Yeah,
how do you
I
recommend?
do. This is a situation where the closing is going to rely on you to explain that to your client filling it up. So I usually talk closer to their ear because I don't want either the buyer or seller to listen to me, or I step out and explain that. It comes with appliances, the store and blah, 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 blah. And I tell my client, what do you think will be the value if you have to sell them on a garage sale? And whatever number they say, you always say, yes, that's good enough. Because you don't tell them what's the value. What about $2,000? That's good? Good enough. Put that amount. $10,000? Good enough. And I remind them, whatever the amount is, it may be taxed or not, depending on the county. So I always tell them, I write them down, I pull out the MLS, store a refrigerator in the kitchen, because remember the refrigerator on the garage is gone. The stove, the dishwasher, garage value, they fill it out, good enough. And that's all the interaction you're gonna have at closing with your client.
Wouldn't you just go through that with them like beforehand, before the closing?
You
So they-
generally don't have the form
You
ahead
have
of
it.
time.
Okay.
And so you can prep them and say there's going to be a form. It's called a real property transfer declaration. If you want to make a photocopy and give that to the agents so that they can put it in a package for future use, so
That
that
would be a
you can
good
show them
idea.
as an example. I think 1%, instead of really trying to determine how much is the value of each item, 1% is a beautiful round number, in my opinion. It makes it go fast. This is not a massive, importance, but it needs to be filled out. And they may receive this copy again from the assessor's office. If they do, then they just need to fill it out exactly the same. I've seen an agent say, oh, let me just fill this out for you. I wouldn't really take that approach. I don't think that's a good idea for you just to fill it out on their behalf, because you're not giving them a choice. But you can, you guys can determine, and especially as company agents, how you're going to advise them. But that's my 2 cents for the 2 cents that it's worth. 1% is a really nice, easy round number. They can put stove, refrigerator, carpet, drapes. They can put the brands, however you guys decide to fill this out. But I will, as a closer, be deferring to you to advise your clients on how to do that. The rest of it's normally filled out. Did the total sales price include a trade or exchange of additional real or personal property? 100% of the real property is being purchased. Is it among related parties? And then here's a second piece, Mr. Buyer and agent, please check the condition of the improvements to the property. What condition is the property in? New, excellent, good, average, fair, poor, or salvage. If the lender is up the table, I usually joke, Mr. Buyer, please, I would recommend that you not put poor or salvage because your lender is using this as leverage against the loan that they are giving to you. They want to make sure the house is in good condition. So I would really recommend you not do that.
And is it the lender usually at closing or does it
Sometimes
depend?
it just depends on the loan officer and their schedule.
I'm me dealing with investors and buying rough properties. They sometimes look at me, Lorena, the condition is poor.
If they're using
Yeah.
hard money, it's
Hard
not going to be
cash or something.
significant, they
Yeah.
understand. If it's a normal lender, FHA, conventional purchase, I just would stay away from poor or salvage. And so, you know, you could put average and knowing that they're going to do some rehab stuff to it, but just be cautious about that piece. Then as a closer, I will help. Many times total amount finance is already listed. There's times I may have to go through the documents for a type of financing. Normally it's new financing and then terms fixed and then what the interest rate is. The rest of it's usually filled out and then I have the buyer sign and I joke and say they've left a phone number there, but given it's a government office, I don't like to give them more information than I have to, but it's up to you. So the rest of the documents tend to go a little faster. Mr. Buyer, this is a tenancy disclosure. On that general warranty deed, it shows that you are choosing to take title as joint tenants. That means you're taking title together with equal rights and obligations to the property until one owner dies. Upon death of that owner, the owner's interest in the property passes to the surviving owner without having to go through probate. So this is just reiterating the way that you chose to take title. Do you agree with that? Go ahead and sign, notarize. Utility agreement is for both parties, buyers and sellers, to sign. This is just stating we've got a number of Canyon title documents that's going over, giving a further explanation of some of the fees that were charged on the closing settlement statement. Remember that water escrow? We don't get the water bill until after closing, so this is the $450. Or it might say zero if the HOA pays for the water out of part of their dues. I sign that one. Remember where Mr. Buyer or Seller, Mr. Seller, you're giving a credit to the buyer for the taxes, property taxes from January 1st to today's date. This is just showing that it's based on the assessed value and the mill levy according to your contract. And it was put on the final settlement statement. The next one is very simple. It's just saying that the property does not belong to a homeowners association, or it does, and we have association information. Mr. Seller, this is an affidavit agreement on the next page. We've got the property address and legal description here. The price is the full purchase price that was agreed to between buyer and seller per the purchase contract. The possession is on or about today's date unless you have a post-occupancy agreement. Mr. Seller, I'm supposed to ask, do you have any new conveyances, judgments, or actions, covenants or encroachments, other parties in possession of the property, outstanding conditions, or work done on the property that has not yet been paid for? They say, no, we have not. Okay, wonderful. That's what I needed to hear. Have them sign.
So all this through the closer is notarizing all the documents and stamping everything. Yes, and signing. Yes.
To consummate the sale of the subject property, any notes, deeds of trust, or liens are going to be paid off that were listed in the county records, and those payoff amounts have been secured by the owners of those notes. So we have received payoffs from your lenders. They've given us the amount, and then they are subject to final audit. We just want to let the buyer know that they're going to be receiving title free and clear of any existing liens. Both buyers and sellers will have a limited power of attorney. Those are the next 2 pages. In the event, and I point out, there is a clerical or typographical error, we are able to correct that on your behalf. That's the only thing that we are able to correct. If we miss a date or let's say it's just not a signature, but just your initials on something, we would be able to correct that versus having you come all the way back to us to have that corrected. The next one is the closing instructions. I'm sure at the very beginning of this transaction that you signed a copy of these closing instructions. It just goes over all of the ability for Canyon Title to be able to receive the earnest money, what happens if the loan had fallen apart during the transaction. We're able to receive all of the monies for this transaction and disperse them according to instructions. And as a listing agent, we will have you also sign that particular document as well. The next one is the bill of sale. This is for any personal property that was included with the transaction. And so we've got your names listed on the top. There's some templated inclusions, and I usually try to make a joke out of this. Mr. Seller, please don't take any of the lighting, heating, plumbing, ventilating, or air conditioning from the property. The personal property that you guys agreed to through the purchase contract that's being included would be the kitchen refrigerator, flat panel TV, TV mounts currently attached to the walls, window air conditioning units currently in the bedrooms in the loft. Exclusions, and I've seen anything from seller's personal property to specific items that the seller was going to take. Does all of this look correct to you? Is there anything else that should be added or taken away? And then I have everybody sign. The next three documents are for you, Mr. Seller, and so Mr. Buyer, you get to take a break just for a moment. So on the top, we have your name, we've got the address, we've got your social security number listed there. This is a tax document. Because it's a government document, of course they use double negatives, and so just keep that in mind. I'm going to help read through this. I owned and used a residence as my principal residence for 2 out of the last 5 years. True, false? True, it was my principal residence. I have not sold or exchanged another principal residence during the 2-year period ending on the date of the sale or exchange of the residence. True. No portion of the residence has been used for business or rental purposes by you or by your spouse or former spouse. And sometimes they hesitate a minute. Well, I said, did you put it on a tax return? How did you claim it on your taxes? No, it wasn't listed. Okay, then it wasn't for business purposes. The next one, the sale or exchange of the entire residence is for $250,000 or less. I'm married. The sale or exchange of the entire residence is for $500,000 or less, and the gain on the sale or exchange is for $250,000 or less. The next one, during the 5-year period ending on the date of the sale, did you purchase this property through a 1031 exchange? You're like, I don't know what that is. It's a tax vehicle. If you didn't use it, if you did use it, you probably would know that you used a 1031 exchange. And then if they did not, I just check mark NA for the basis of the residence through a 1031 exchange.
Now, you ask for social security number. Have you had a situation where they wonder why you're asking for numbers?
Usually they don't ask. If we have it, we would put, it would already be filled in. And I would just say verify that that's your social. On the next page, I usually start with this one, not the one right here. So it says affirmation of Colorado residency on the top. Sorry, I haven't been showing you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So on the very top, we only have them sign one of these. They can just say it's an affirmation of Colorado residency. They don't have to sign each one of them that apply. As soon as they sign affirmation of Colorado residency, that's the one they choose to sign. Sometimes on this form, if you've got a husband and wife, we only have one listed on this form. And so I would fill in the other portion with just the wife or the husband's name. They're selling as an individual. I put their social security number, selling price of the property we have listed there, and then check mark, okay, we signed the affirmation of Colorado residency. Those two forms are being sent in together. The only time this is of great significance is if we have an out-of-state seller selling a Colorado rental property. As a title company, we have to collect 2% of their proceeds and send it into the IRS. The next one is a newer form. It's a certificate of non-foreign status. And so we have the legal description there, and then we have the property address. And so, of course, being another government document, it's a double negative. The transfer seller is not a non-resident alien, foreign corporation, foreign partnership, foreign trust, or foreign estate. And then here's your social. Does that look correct? And then we have them sign and date. The next one is our privacy policy for Mr. Buyer and Mr. Seller. This is just saying that we do not sell, share, or exchange your information, your private information with anyone, nor use it for any kind of marketing purposes. We keep it private. The following documentation, Mr. Seller, is a happy form. It's asking how you want us to transfer your funds. It says in the form of a check, that would be a Canyon title check. So let's take a little rabbit trail here. Let's say that you are organizing a back-to-back domino type closing because a seller is selling and then on the same day they're purchasing another property. That is a whole lot of fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be careful of the timing as far as when they're closing in the morning. You know, I wouldn't close too early, like a 7:30 or 8 a.m., you know, in the morning, but there needs to be enough time that as a title company, we would be able to transfer by wire after the closing is done to the next title company in which they're going to close on the buy side. And then we can also send the closing settlement statement, which is probably requested before closing, that we would send that and assign. So just keep in mind, and the way wire transfers work, as soon as the closing is completely done, we send everything into the lender for the new buyer. They give us funding authorization. That means that they've looked over all the documents. There's nothing that's been missed or anything like that. And so they say, okay, we give you authorization to receive the money that we've wired to you and disperse the proceeds. And so as soon as that's done, then we are able to make photocopies, do checks, all of that great stuff. And so sometimes there is a wait time in order to get funding authorization. On the seller side, if they bring, so when you're coaching your sellers, I would normally ask them to bring one photo ID that's current, driver's license or passport. It has to be a state or government type of ID. If you're dealing with someone who's much older, please, please, please keep this in mind. If they're 90, they probably aren't driving anymore and they probably don't have a driver's license that's current. They probably aren't flying anymore, so they may not have a current passport.
My dad's 93 and he drives and flies all the time.
I said probably. Your dad's wonderful and exceptional. I'm just saying, keep in mind,
Does happen.
because I have dealt with this several times. We get down to closing, they're like, they don't drive anymore. I would have no idea where their driver's license is or if it's valid, and they don't have an updated passport. So they have to be taken down to the DMV for a Colorado ID to have some kind of a current, you know, a current
Just
valid.
one or two forms of ID.
So as a title company, we only require one. If they are purchasing something, the lenders are now requiring 2 forms of ID, but they could use a gym membership versus like a Visa card, a library card or something like that. It could be something else. But please just keep in mind, if you're dealing with someone elderly, please ask towards the beginning of the transaction, you know, do you have a valid current driver's license or passport? Is there a way for me or one of your family members to take you to the DMV to get a Colorado ID? Just so we're not waiting till the last minute. There's also multiple Hispanic or another nationality that we're dealing with, and they may not have a U.S. passport or a U.S. driver's license. Hopefully there's some form of ID, so just clear that through title as far as what they will approve and look for. And if they don't have a social security number, if they have a tax EIN, a tax ID number, that would absolutely work in order to buy and sell real estate. But also double check with the title company, are they going to hold on to some of those proceeds from, if they are the seller and they have just the EIN number, are they moving out of state? And is the title company going to hold some of those proceeds after closing? Are they required to? What are they going to do with that? So on the seller side, wire is really a wonderful, easy thing for us to do. If they bring us a copy of a canceled check, it would have the routing number for the bank and their account number on that canceled check. We would have them write it down, and I usually paperclip or staple that canceled check so there's no misinformation or errors in what information's put here. As a newer agent, think through. I had a seller who was leaving town immediately after the closing. They thought they were going to be able to get a check that they would take to the bank for their $150,000 and have instant access to buy snow tires for their trip. the bank is gonna hold on to a large check for 5 to 10 days, most
Until it
likely.
clears, yeah.
We can certainly wire the money to their account, but it won't hit within 20 minutes. So when we request a wire, in our system, we type in, the wire, the amount, it goes to our bank. Our bank and the bank, representatives have to then push that wire request through the Federal Reserve, which is on the opposite side of the country on the East Coast, which is 2 hours ahead, and then it cycles back around to hit the client's bank account. If you schedule a 2 o'clock Friday afternoon closing, do you think there's any way they're gonna have their money by Friday afternoon? Wire cutoff time is 2 o'clock. We might be able to squeeze to 2:40, but understand, we request it, but then it goes to our bank. It could be in a long line of wires that go out, goes to the Federal
Goes to
Reserve,
queue,
and they're
queue.
closed for the weekend.
Yeah.
It's not open on Saturday, so those sellers won't have that money until Monday. Just try to have that conversation with your sellers. Be aware of what the process is. And that's why I'm such a goofball and try to explain some of those things, because if someone didn't just lay it out clearly, how does this work? How does a wire work? How long does it take to hit the bank? There's agents that have promised it'll be there immediately. We don't have any control over it hitting their bank immediately.
Yeah, it's something to be aware. Wherever you wire, there's charges, either seller or buyers. Wire charges that you need to be aware.
15,
Oh, they're
20,
charging me
$25.
Is the wire, yes.
And verify all account numbers to make sure it's hitting properly. So a cashier's check, there are times where another title company won't receive the opposite title company's company check, and they require a cashier's check because there's not enough time to wire, something to that effect. In order for us to get a cashier's check is from the bank. That means that someone from the title company has to leave the office in order to go to a local branch to actually get a cashier's check. Do you think that's going to be an immediate process? What if it's the last closing day of the month and you're in back-to-back closings? How the heck are you going to get to the bank to get a cashier's check? So just be aware of those simple things and prepping your buyer, your seller for how it works.
Yeah, precisely because you're so dependent on the banks. You just bank time. So if there is a Monday holiday and the banks are closed, your title company, your closing is not happening on that day. Because you need to deal with the bank transaction.
It may be possible for us to accommodate a closing on a bank holiday, but we can't wire any money. So money would have to, essentially you're closing an escrow because money can't exchange hands, and we would have to have the lender figures by the Friday beforehand, and everything in hand before that, because the bank's probably closed, from which we're trying to get the loan documents. So talk to your escrow officer and ask, how are you going to handle this? Can you accommodate it? What are our options? The other piece to think about, if you have someone who's out of state, a seller, for Canyon Title, it's really easy. We've got mobile closer access anywhere in the country. So if someone's going on vacation and they want to do a power of attorney, but there's really no one they would trust to sign on behalf of them in order to do a last minute power of attorney, we can send a mobile closer to their hotel, meet them in a lobby while they're out sipping a drink, as long as they're coherent and not incoherent Mexico. And so, but the one thing that we've run into is, what if they're in Mexico? What if they're out of the country?
Out of the country.
It has to be a U.S. notary that would notarize the documents.
So you have to go to an
be
embassy.
a military base, or an embassy, like you said. I had one where CTME contracts, it's all online. Man, that's the easy part. Son was here, mother was in very rural France. So he could help get everything signed, here or over email. But what happens to the closing documents? Even a power of attorney has to be notarized by a U.S. notary. She was 2.5 hours from the nearest military base. And so I was looking up online, trying to figure out what was the hierarchy for the government in the rural town that she was living in, to find out if we could get underwriting approval for that. So there's a lot of really interesting scenarios that happen. There was a guy that was on a military ship for months at a time, and they had U.S. notaries, but they're out in the middle of the ocean. They didn't have access to FedEx overnight.
Mhm.
So timing something like that, okay, great. You've got a US notary. You can scan and email that. The ship had that capability, but what about the originals?
Mhm.
So anyways, just keep those things in mind. Buyer information sheet, this is just so that we can contact them in the event we need to. Seller, we need their forwarding address to send the overage for like the water escrow. We've got copies of the homeowners information, association information. I'll have the buyer fill out their information, community fee certification. Those are all normal HOA type documents. And then usually there's a tax or certificate of taxes, as well as a payoff from the seller's bank. And then a couple of the other documents that are important. This is the basic package for every normal resale closing. And then if it is a VA or an FHA, if you're splitting up the closing, we need to know if the seller needs to sign any of those documents in the loan package. If it's an FHA, there's at least 3, sometimes 4 documents that you as a real estate agent have to sign, as well as the sellers. What if we let them leave and they're heading out of state and they're on a big truck moving and it's an FHA deal? So as a closer, we need to know that it's an FHA or a VA, and whether or not the sellers have to sign any of those loan documents, and that really comes into play with the timing of you know, who signs first or separately and how all that works. When I start on the buyer, I didn't give you guys a copy of a deed of trust or a promissory note, but I usually tell the buyer there's 2 documents, maybe 3 in this entire stack of paperwork that's really important. So we're going to whiz through most of them. If you have questions, please ask. But the 2 documents, this is the deed of trust. It's going to be recorded in the county records. It is actually putting a voluntary lien on the property to go through it. And it shows in all of these words, if you don't pay, you don't get to stay, and what the bank's rights are to foreclose against you. So this is going to be a public record recorded against it. And the promissory note, this original, the lender has to hold on to. And again, if you don't pay, you don't stay. If there's an HOA, then there's riders saying that you're going to obey the covenants and restrictions of the community. And please don't keep anything flammable in your house or blow it up. And so go through and then if they want a paper copy of all the documents, I try to stack it with the important documents on the top, including a general warranty deed of trust, promissory note, bill of sale, and that property transfer declaration, as well as a payment statement on the very top. You kind of organize it.
So those are the important documents. So at the end, when the title closer already received the money on the computer system and say, okay, we got the money, the title closer steps out to make copies of all the documents, because everybody gets copies. That's the formal, how you say, ceremony. Then I ask my seller, okay, give the keys to the buyer, then pictures take place. I had some agents bring in non-alcoholic wines or the basket. The time when you're waiting for the copies is when the buyer and seller meet either in the same place, or then you get the keys. Okay, I have the keys for you, this is for the mailbox, and this is for the gate, and this is blah, blah. That's when you share keys. Then the title closer comes back and you'll receive a copy. Nowadays, I've been asking everything electronic. So that's what the electronic file, that's what you're gonna upload on the paperless system. Sometimes I have copies. I save part of me following up with my client on tax season. I send them this, remember your close, make sure you present that to your tax advisor. So it keeps me in contact with my clients as well, or the buyer or the seller. Once you have the copies is when you get paid. There will be 2-3 checks, one for you, one for the other agent, one for the K company, and that's when you get paid at the end of all the closings.
Normally, once I'm done with all of this, I will explain what I'm doing. A lot of closers will just get up and leave and say, okay, I'm gonna go make copies. And I let them know, I'm gonna take this entire stack of documents and I need to scan them into the system and we need to send them to the lender. The lender set the wire, but they need to verify everything has been signed correctly and give us funding authorization. Just because we received the wire doesn't mean we can touch it yet. We have to have their okay to disperse funding authorization. And so I explained that so people know what the heck I'm doing in that mystery back room. And then I asked them, would you like paper copy? Would you like a secure email copy, or would you like both? And so if they say both, I go back. First, I scan everything into the system, and then I start making all the copies and all of that good stuff. I come back in, we have funding authorization. We're working on cutting all of the checks now. And so I will stick the checks into the appropriate folders and making sure the agents have the documents that they need.
If the lender is present, sometimes they are the one in contact with their office. Oh yeah, we send an email, let me forward it to you, blah, blah. If the lender is not present, then you're relying on the lender communicating with title at that moment as well. So it's kind of, everything is the last minute type of thing, sit and wait.
And if your seller's in a hurry or they have a time crunch for work or something like that, we can say, you know what? And there's times we will cut a check for you as an agent and say, don't cash it yet. We'll call you. You know, we're waiting for funding authorization. I don't want everyone sitting around for an hour. You know, maybe the 20 minutes it takes to go back and make photocopies. Sometimes the silly copy machines jam. And if you think of a loan package, you know, plus the resale documents, it takes a little while. So the first thing, take care of the lender, deal with the escrow officer and, you know, all of that, and then start making all the copies. If it's going to be a while, and that lender's notorious for having 200 loans that they're waiting to fund, we'll say, you know what? I just want to congratulate all of you. Why don't you go ahead and go on your way? What an exciting process. Thank you for using us. And we'll give you guys a call and just let you know when it's been totally completed. Congratulations on your new home. And it's like, I don't want just sitting around waiting for an hour, hour and a half. And there's times that's happened. So just know, you know, be sensitive and aware. Don't cash your check. Don't do anything with it until we call and let you know.
Yeah, but it's, you know, I make it a big ceremony, receiving the keys. I take a picture, or sometimes I follow with them home, take a picture of them, make it a big event with the client. Bring a present or a basket. Sometimes I bring it to the closing, or nowadays if I'm too busy, I have it delivered to the doorstep. So by the time they're moving in, they get a package from me. So depending on, you know, your budget and how you want to give a gift to your client.
And Canyon Title built out a marketing store, and there's actually closing gifts at the office. So before closing, because you're usually really busy, you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, there's different kinds of baskets. And if you're closing in the DTC office, then you can order it. It shows if there's stock for that or not. You can pay online, or in our Westminster office or downtown office, and it's all there, and it's been reserved for you. And there's usually a thank you card inside the basket. So we're trying to make it easier on you guys as you're scrambling.
Yeah.
Very good.
So any questions regarding, like you see, it's a whole process. At the beginning, be with your mentor or with another experienced agent, but later on, just count that you are there to help the client. I stayed the whole hour, 2 or 3 with them, so I schedule myself properly, because sometimes they have questions, or sometimes everybody's quiet. So it's usually kind of, okay, have some chit chat going on, make the time go faster, while there are things going on in the background. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
You're welcome. Hopefully it wasn't too redundant. I know you've done this at timer 200.
No. It's always good to just, you know, police, firefighters, military people do the same drills over and over again to keep them sharp. You know, so.
Yeah.
And like I said, I know it feels like a lot of rabbit trails, but I think that understanding what's happening behind the scenes is important, because most people don't know. How does it work between title and lenders? You know, what's going on behind the scenes? What are we waiting for? Why is it taking so long? Why don't I have my closing disclosure? And so that's some of the explanation, just so you are more prepared for coaching your clients. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
It was
thank you.
wonderful to meet you.
Thank you, Debra. So I'm going to end the recording. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's
Thank
see.
you for the referral. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
you're
I'm gonna
welcome.
talk
Let me
to
know
him
how
this
it goes.
afternoon.